Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. أما بعد أحبتي في الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وأسأل الله كريم رب العرش العظيم أن يتولنا في الدنيا والآخرة. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, accepts our good and forgives our evil, protects us from kulli su and makruh, rectifies our condition and affairs. Ahabati fillah, maintain sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all throughout this holy month of Ramadan and through all acts of ibadah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, في كتابه الكريم وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين. And they were not commanded except to worship Allah alone, and for Him is the religion, meaning being sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what all the prophets alayhim afdal salatu wasalam were commanded with sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with tawheed, the worship of Allah azza wa jal alone. So it's kind of amazing that there would be social media pundits today who would claim that, tawheed is not in the Quran, or Tawheed is not that important, or you can learn Tawheed in 5 minutes. Tawheed is the foundation of the religion, the sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this ikhlas. Because this ikhlas, the sincerity, is articulated through the tongue, the limbs, through our actions and our statements, that we are manifesting this sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are worshiping Him and Him alone. That's what it means. And since the nations from before us were commanded with that, and that's what the prophets alayhim afdal salatu wasalam were sent with as well, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says في كتاب الكريم وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. We sent to every nation a messenger to worship Allah alone and avoid false deities. So if that is the main command that the prophets, alayhim afdal salatu wassalam, that they were sent with, then of course it goes without saying that that is the basis of our deen and what we are sent with to mankind, to share the message of Islam, the message of Tawheed, the message of the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And one of the ways we know this divine maqsad, this intent, is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, في كتابه الكريم وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've not created mankind and the jinn except for the purpose of worshiping me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has let us know that we're here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. That's why we're here. And that means we need to direct ourselves to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because we're now in Ramadan, that we should strive our best to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the sincerity, and that means being sincere in our fasting. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to fast, like those who came before us were commanded to fast, and it was an act of worship. And guess what? And it was a way to achieve taqwa, God fearfulness or God consciousness, meaning that you're conscious of your Lord, you're conscious of His boundaries, and you are striving to avoid His prohibitions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, في كتابه المبين, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم صيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you similar to the way it's been prescribed for those who came before you, لعلكم تتقون, in order that you gain taqwa. So that lets us know also that the purpose is worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're trying to attain and gain taqwa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that means adhering to the commands of Allah and avoiding His prohibitions. So as Muslims, as believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, strive your best to be sincere, strive your best to draw nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all with ikhlas, with thabat, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all from the hellfire and bless us this holy month of Ramadan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.